This week on Homekit News, the Zemismart lock with Homekit and Zigbee. Zemismart were kind enough to send this lock out to me a couple of months back, although from the packaging it could be from anyone really. Nevertheless, it's a smart lock, but to save some of you some time, this lock is not weatherproof, so you'll only be able to use it in covered areas like porches or apartment complexes. As stated on the box, this uses Zigbee, and so if you want to use the smart features, you're going to need the company's hub for HomeKit support, as well as Amazon and SmartThings. Speaking of Amazon, do check out Paul Hibbert's video on this lock for more on the Amazon side of things. The lock comes with a latch bolt and a mortise bolt and does support left and right opening doors, but this is not a deadbolt lock. Let's see what's in the box now, which includes a quite detailed English manual for installation and operation, the two halves of the lock itself, which we'll take a look at shortly, and the mortise lock that sits inside your door. Now, Zemismart sell the lock in different faceplate lengths, which is pretty useful. Finally, there's a small bag with a few bits and pieces to hold it all together, along with a couple of key cards. Laid out here is everything you should have in the box, and I'm not going to go through the installation process because it depends on your door, but the manual explains it all pretty well. I did mention that the lock can fit left and right opening doors, and to adjust the handles you simply need to loosen the screws on both halves. You then just need to spin the handle to the opposite direction and then retighten the screws. For the latch bolt, you simply lift a little catch here and swivel the bolt to the opposite direction. Easy peasy. Let's have a closer look at the two halves of the lock now, starting with the battery compartment. This takes 4 AAA batteries and should last between 2 to 5 months depending on usage. The exterior handle has a built-in fingerprint sensor, which is probably the easiest unlock method, although this half also contains the keypad for occasional visitors or guests. On the underside of the lock there's a traditional keyhole along with a small speaker and a micro USB port for temporarily powering the lock if the batteries unexpectedly die. Back to the interior, and you get a deadlock switch that blocks nearly all external entry methods. Speaking of entry methods, I'll just quickly demonstrate the methods available, starting with what I'd consider the most natural option, the fingerprint sensor. For guests, there's also a keypad for temporary or permanent passcodes. As you can see, after a few seconds the lock automatically relocks itself as standard. I showed you some key cards earlier, and although they function like NFC cards, these use what is called an integrated circuit, or IC for short. As with fingerprints, these cards offer really fast reaction times and can be put on a keyring or given to guests. When it comes to the keys, these don't quite work as you'd expect. In this case, you insert the key, turn it, then turn the handle, which is the action that actually disengages the bolts, not the keys. Funnily enough, the lock even contains a doorbell which sends a push notification to your phone. How people are meant to know is another question entirely, however, as it can only be triggered by pressing the hash button on the keypad. One feature that I do really like is passage mode, which allows the lock to remain unlocked. After unlocking the door, press 5 and hash to enable it. This is especially useful if you're going in and out of the front door a few times to grab something like your shopping from the car, for example. To disable passage mode, you simply need to press the keypad or the fingerprint sensor and the lock will automatically lock itself once again. I'll now just quickly show you the deadlock switch I mentioned earlier. So flipping the switch up disengages any option to unlock the door from the outside, with one exception being the keys. Even the lock administrator can't open the lock in this state, unless of course they've got the keys. I'll get into the HomeKit side of things shortly, but first off, here are some of the features you get in the Toya Smart app. So you get quick access to the lock on the main screen, and if you dive in you have a dedicated button for the lock itself, along with a few other options. One of these is the usage logs associated with the log, as seen here. You can add or remove users and even add permanent or temporary unlock methods. The good news is family members don't need a Toya account or the app to use the lock, which is also the case for temporary passcodes. You can even have one-off passcodes that last for just 24 hours and can only be used once, with the app generating a random code for you. You can also name these codes and delete or freeze them at any time. Periodic passwords allow you to set a start and end date, as well as set specific times of the day and even days of the week, which is something my Aqara A100 Zigbee lock isn't quite as flexible at right now. These codes can even be sent via text message. Finally, dynamic codes are one-off codes that literally expire in 5 minutes of being created, so quite useful for when a delivery unexpectedly arrives and you're not at home. This lock only uses Zigbee, so reaction times are pretty good, as I'll demonstrate now. This first demo has both the lock's hub and the phone connected to the local network, and judging by the changes to the lock's icon, it's pretty fast. This next example has the phone only on 4G, not the local network. Once again, pretty fast reaction times. Here's a test for the speed of the lock's reaction times when controlled from the Home app, with the phone connected to the local network. Now, coming from using Bluetooth locks in the past, this is definitely faster. And finally, to cover all bases, this is the same test again, controlling the lock from the Home app, but with the phone on 4G on this occasion and not connected to the local network. Features in the Home app are at a bare minimum here, so don't expect things like guest access for this lock anytime soon. You get a tile, the toggle control, and the ability to include it in scenes and automations. However, even auto unlocking isn't going to be of much use here, given that the lock relocks itself after a few seconds. Typically, most HomeKit locks use Bluetooth to connect to a home hub, like a HomePod or an Apple TV, or even their own Bluetooth to Wi-Fi bridge, which then connect both to HomeKit and to your Wi-Fi router. This also allows you to connect directly to your lock via Bluetooth, built into both the lock and your phone. Now, because this lock only has Zigbee, it takes that direct connectivity out of the equation, which means you rely on your home network working and being reachable in order to connect to the lock remotely. Still, as this lock has many direct and physical means of opening the door, like fingerprint or keypad, in reality it would be rare for all of these options to fail, and even if they did and the lock had Bluetooth, Bluetooth itself could fail, of course. Adding users and the entry methods is done via the lock, not the app, unfortunately. So once the admin has entered their details, you get 4 main options and then sub-options within those. For a new passcode, you tap it in twice and that code becomes available to assign later on, with fingerprints and keycards using similar entry methods. When the new code is actually used for the first time, it'll then be registered in the logs within the Zemismart app. You can see it here in the log with a link user button at the side. Tapping on that then allows me to assign that particular passcode to a previously added user. If I now go back into the logs, you can see the passcode shows that it's now assigned to a specific user. Finally, onto our pros and cons, and at a price of around $100 or £90, this is a really decent budget smart lock, offering a lot more than many other locks at twice the price, although you have to factor in the cost of the hub if you don't already have one. Compared to a deadbolt lock, fitting is a little bit more involved, but if you already have a mortise lock in place, this is a fairly straightforward swap, especially compared to my Aqara A100. As it only uses Zigbee, you're getting really decent and consistent reaction times, even if you don't get a direct Bluetooth connection with your phone. Now, Zemismart also offer other sizes, so you should be able to find a size that meets your needs. In terms of cons, there's no waterproofing, as I stated at the beginning, so it's of limited appeal, unfortunately. And whilst the app is easy to use, there are some awful bugs that need fixing, like what seems to be an inability to remove a fingerprint or code from a user without totally removing the user as well. If, like me, you're a HomeKit user, then for the most part you won't be using the app, but it still needs looking at. That's our overview of the Zemismart Zigbee Smart Lock, but if you have any questions on the lock or I missed something, please make use of the comments section below. If you like this video, please give it the proverbial thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Until the next time, stay safe and learn some slap bass.